Just recently, one set of Indian people get caught with false papers. False papers. I'm yet to see one single African in the lot, and not one of them fraudsters ever face a court. So your theory have more holes than a water can. Like it's better.
Hi folks, good evening and thank you so much for joining me. You know what? I have to get tech guy to come in here and check back this audio system because I find I always get a hissing in my ears and some other weird noises, and I'm not sure why. I'm also getting a double echo, and that only kicked in just now. Anyhow, we here and we ready to go. Hi, good evening everybody. How you all doing? You all hearing me clearly? Am I sounding like a chipmunk to anybody at all, or am I sounding normal? Okay, good. I'm glad I'm sounding normal to you guys because I'm sounding like a chipmunk in my ear, and I'm not sure what has caused that, but you know, we go work with it. All right, hi. So this live wasn't meant to actually happen because since the last time, the live that I actually planning to do it earlier is one about guns and about gun crimes and gun violence here. That's what I've been working on. And then a range of things happen. So let me jump into it properly. Let me do it as I need to do properly. First off, everybody that's here with me, thank you so much for joining me because we don't normally do a live on a Tuesday evening. I actually planned to do this live yesterday, but it didn't work out, and I'm kind of glad that it didn't work out because there are a bunch of things that happened between yesterday and today. So I feel like the live will be even better planned today based on the material that I would have collected and sat down and looked at. So, Vonnet Rich Boy, Vonnet, what you doing here? There's about false papers. You all your qualifications is bona fide qualifications. What you doing here, girl? Hi Pauline, hi Rainman, hi Eve, hi Barbara Ravello, hi Reds, hi Storm, hi Chelsea, hi James, hi Val Bowen, Otis Cabrales. I didn't hail all you out properly. I just kind of jump into things, but that's because I don't want this to be long. I want this to be nice and crisp because we're taking a little trip down memory lane. And I know plenty of you think that we only going and go back to 2010, but no. We're going further back than that because I want us to understand the bitterness that we've been seeing for the last couple of days, right? I want us to properly understand why between Saturday and now, everybody carrying on in the way, well, not everybody, but you all know what I'm talking about. The usual suspects carrying on the way they're carrying on. But before we get into that, applause, which is akin to good news. Justice Peter Jamada, who is, if I am not mistaken, the son of Vernon Jamada. So he comes from a family of lawyers. He recently was awarded an honorary degree as well from Emmanuel College of Victoria University, and he would have done a master's at Emmanuel College, which is part of Victoria University. So congratulations to him. And the thing is, the masters that he did, based on that post that I put up, the press release from the CCJ, because you know that Justice Jamada is no longer with the Trinidad and Tobago's judiciary. He's now at the Caribbean Court of Justice. So based on the press release that they issued, it appears as if the masters that he did was actually linked to religion. So it looks like he has I think it's a master's in divinity, and so he has an honorary degree from that college. So I guess it's an honorary degree also within the area of divinity. So congratulations to Justice Peter Jamada. He's no longer with our judiciary, but he's part of the regional judiciary now, the Caribbean Court of Justice. And I'm hoping that we join that court at some point in time. So congrats to him. Then, of course, I want to congratulate these two fellas, Deontay and Tyrone, who graduated from Howard with the highest GPA at the college. I think that's great news. I mean, the only downside to it is two fellas that score the kind of scores that them score in the area that they score, the scores that they score, we know they ain't coming back to Trinidad. We know that tech companies in the United States going to snap them up, which is not a bad thing for them. But for us, it means brain drain. But it's great to see our young people who would have gone through our education system here, going on to education systems in other parts of the world, and not just thriving, but excelling, right? Topping classes and topping years and whatever. So great to see it, happy to see it. Congratulations to them. Right, so that is that bit there. So now we're moving into the meat of the matter, because I ain't looking to draw things out, right? So this happened.
To join fellow honorees, Prime Minister Rowley. Prime Minister, I didn't know you were so talented. I just thought you were a foreign policy, Latin American guy. We got to talk. All kidding aside, thank you for being a strong partner in the Caribbean and for addressing climate change and supporting democracies across the Western Hemisphere. To join fellow honorees, Prime Minister Rowley. Prime Minister, I didn't know you were so talented. I just thought you were a foreign policy, Latin American guy. We got to talk. All kidding aside, thank you for being a strong partner in the Caribbean and for addressing climate change and supporting democracies across the Western Hemisphere.
I doubt any of you missed that video, because I would have put it up on News Source as well. So that is President of the United States, Joe Biden, Joseph R. Biden. And we like to laugh and joke plenty on my page saying that Joe Biden is a PNM, right? But it seems this weekend that the opposition forces in this country, especially the United National Congress, seem to really think that Joe Biden is a PNM. So all of you would know that the Prime Minister would have received an honorary degree. He made an announcement at a post-cabinet press conference indicating to us that he would be traveling to the United States of America. It was common news, right? That the Prime Minister was going to the United States and he was going to be receiving an honorary degree from Howard University. Now, Howard University is one of those historically black universities or colleges in the United States. And one of our sons of the soil, Dr. Frederick, is there as I've forgotten his position at the university. Forgive me. These things flying out my head real easy these days. In any case, Howard University awarded our Prime Minister an honorary degree. It was televised live on Saturday morning. And after the awarding of the honorary degree, right, he's the president of the college. Okay, he's of the university. He's the president of the... Great. So we have a Trinbagonian, right? Well, born Trinbagonian. He's, dual citizenship now. Who is the president of Howard University. In 2020, he would have received the Order of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. And there are a couple things that I feel I need to break down here. To get the Order of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, the Prime Minister is not the only person who makes recommendations. And the Prime Minister is not the person who selects people. The Prime Minister can make recommendations to the Office of the President, but it's the Office of the President that's responsible for these awards. And there is a whole committee. The committee is actually called the Order of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. So the Chief Justice sits on it, the President sits on it. I've forgotten who the other persons that sit on it. And they go through a list of persons, and it's a long list. I don't know if you all have ever looked at our awards list on an annual basis to see the various ranges of medals, and whether it's hummingbird this, Shakonia that, bronze, silver, gold, whatever, and then of course the Order of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. So Dr. Frederick would have gotten the order back in 2020. Is it 2020? My goodness, my brain all over the place right now. But Dr. Frederick got the award a couple years ago. Nobody raised a noise about it. And you know why nobody raised a noise about it? Because when you look at his CV, when you look at his achievements, when you look at, thank you very much, Leon Graves, I wasn't wrong, 2020. When you look at the range of things that he has achieved, he meets our criteria for receiving the Order of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. I don't think anybody felt that he was not deserving of the highest award that the land had to offer. And yes, I'm dying to say Trinity Cross. Dying to say Trinity Cross, because of course that is what I be thinking, right? Trinity Cross. But let me go with Order of the Republic so that Satmarad's spirit could rest quiet in the grave. So Dr. Frederick gets the highest award that the country can give to a son or daughter of the soil. Nobody have an issue with that. The man properly well qualified. No false papers there, no false accreditation, no false qualifications whatsoever. Hey Kareem, nice to see you. Well, this is a good life for you to be on, Kareem, because they love to pound you for getting your law degree. So this happens in 2020. Flash forward now to what year are we in? 2023. So 3 years later. And 3 years later, Howard University, a historically black university, gives a range of awards. And one of the persons who gets an award is our Prime Minister. So I want to go now to the award, and I want us to listen to what is read out and said.
Vice Chair Mark Mason, please present the Honorable Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley. The Honorable Keith Christopher Rowley, renowned social and political leader, pioneering statesman and scholar. Esteemed scientist, your noble vision, stellar intellect, and dynamic servant leadership have propelled you throughout a lifetime of illustrious achievements as you serve the more than 1.5 million citizens of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago as Prime Minister, the first Tobagonian and seventh in the history of your country. You led the people's national movement to victory in the general election of 2015 and won re-election in 2020. For more than 3 decades, you have been a member of the House of Representatives for Diego Martin West in the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago. Since 1981, you have been a major player in the political arena of your country. Most notably, you have continued to strengthen the partnership between Trinidad and Tobago and the United States through our shared interests in many areas, including security, energy, education, agriculture, and the arts. During your tenure as chairman of the Conference of Heads of Government of the Caribbean Community, CARICOM, you have emphasized this important partnership as well as the deeply rooted ties between the two countries, with numerous native-born West Indians living and contributing to the health and wealth of the United States and vice versa. Also, your enterprising efforts have fostered regional integration among Caribbean countries, including Barbados, Jamaica, and Guyana. Well versed in the history of the Caribbean and the Americas, even before the United States became an independent nation, you often impart lessons of little-known facts about the relationship in your speeches and conversations. The Republic of Trinidad and Tobago has experienced welcome growth. Government policies implemented to promote diversification, investments, and tax incentives for small business have increased the rate of economic growth. Energy reforms are also at the heart of your goals. The National Gas Master Plan promotes renewable energy sources to lessen the country's dependence on fossil fuels and encourages private investment to explore new gas and oil resources. During your tenure, quality education has also been a strong priority with increased school funding as well as more opportunities for vocational training. Under the School Improvement Project, you renovated and upgraded facilities nationwide. Likewise, the number of community centers has expanded with a number of projects within the Digger Martin community you represent. And such centers are crucial to the lifeblood of the citizens, with more than 40 open throughout the country since your first term in office. Infrastructure and healthcare have been central to the well-being of your constituents with improved roads.
So I'm pausing there because it's 4 whole minutes this man was introducing Dr. Rowley, 4 minutes. Imagine your CV so long that just to introduce you, to say these are the things that you have achieved in the last however many years, 4 minutes. And the one correction, the only correction that I would have had inside there is, he's not the first Tobagonian to be Prime Minister of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. He's the second person. Because the points made there about the economic revival of the country, there was no lie there. We had the IMF report. And we had the IMF report that people was going stupid over, right? You had Roger Hossain making up his own research and his own data to refute the things that the IMF report was saying. And what the report came out to say, and let us bear in mind that the IMF is not a party group in Trinidad and Tobago. And there have been many years that the IMF has had very negative things to say about our fiscal standing, right? How the economy going, how good we are for investments. There have been many years when there would have been negative reports. We get a class 4 report that is saying that the way in which we have managed the economy from 2020 to now, and by that, we're referring to the pandemic, the way in which it was handled, top marks. The other thing that the IMF would have been looking at are the ranges of, or the series of oil shocks that our economy sustained from 2016 to 2023. The range of fluctuations in the energy market that the economy sustained, and the policies that would have been put in place for us to keep the country afloat. And I want you all to bear in mind, from 2015 to now, with oil shocks, with pandemic, with fluctuating oil prices, the country didn't go to the IMF and it didn't go to the World Bank. It handled its affairs. You had Imbert as Minister of Finance saying, we are not going to the IMF. You had Imbert saying that we here in Trinidad and Tobago are going to put our own measures in place. And the major reason that that position was taken is that we know as a country, some of you might be too young to know this, but I was alive in the 80s and 90s when the IMF steps in and makes structural changes to our country. You just had to lay off public servants, you just had to introduce new taxes, and you just have to introduce salary cuts. The government here didn't want to do any of those measures. They also did not want to float the dollar further. Right? So from 2015 to now, we have had a protected float of the US to TT dollar. We have also had our own austerity measures that we here within the country would have created to be able to maximize employment and to keep people ticking over so that they're earning when the month come so they could provide for their families. plenty people don't like to hear these things because, of course, nobody wants to hear positives. They only want to hear, oh, we catching, we ask, the place is the worst place, it ain't have this, it ain't have that. And listen, I am not by any stretch of the imagination saying that we are in perfect circumstances or perfect situations, but you had to give Jackie jacket. We didn't keep VAT at 15%. We lowered VAT from 15% to 12.5% to ease up people's pocket. Personal income, that too experienced shifts and changes. So if you were making $5,000 a month, $5,000 a month was the limit that didn't have to deal up with taxes like PAYE. That has been incrementally increased to $7,500. So if you are making $7,500 a month, you don't have to pay personal income tax. You will be paying NIS and health surcharge, but you are not paying personal income tax. That means extra money in your pocket to deal up with inflation in the grocery. So, Supermarket Association, them are doing nothing about inflation and higher prices. Private sector, people who run in businesses here, them are doing nothing about inflation and higher prices. Everybody turning around and saying, well, what the government doing, what the government doing? And budget after budget after budget, Imbert is coming and saying, we're going to increase personal income allowance. We're increasing it by 1,000 this year. We're increasing it by 1,000 this year. We're increasing it by $500 this year. So it went from $5,000 to $6,000 to $7,000 to $7,500. But to stop and say, what you did there, that was a good job. No, we could never do that. We don't ever like to give people praise. We don't ever like to praise ourselves. We don't ever like to pause and say, well, you know what? You see that thing we do there? That was a good thing. That working out for people. And you know why we don't do them things? Because we just struggle to look at ourselves and see that we are actually world class. We don't like to think of ourselves as being world class, as doing good things to ourselves. We prefer to sit down and drag down ourselves day after day after day. And there are a certain concentrated group of assholes in this country that 24/7 all they're doing is dragging Trinidad and Tobago name in the mud. So Dr. Rowley gets an award, gets an honorary degree, and the criteria that people just really irritate me, the criteria that they would have given for why he would have been given the award is a very simple criteria. The changes and restructuring that would have been done to the energy sector and to the economy of Trinidad and Tobago. And you have reports, world reports, lodged in the public domain to explain and justify the decision that Howard University would have made. So, with my limited understanding of how these things happen, let me explain something to you. The president of Howard could not just get up and give an award to Dr. Rowley, right? Because you have a board of governors. So for something like that to happen, a case had to be made. Dr. Rowley's name would have to go onto a long list. And what I'm explaining to you all here right now is a process that I understand from working at the University of the West Indies. Every year, UE, when it's having its graduation, does bestow honorary doctorates on a range of persons. Most recently, my faculty would have awarded Dr. I'm calling she doctor because she get a doctorate. Dr. Rosalind Gabriel, mask designer, she would have gotten an honorary PhD. Now, Rosalind Gabriel, mask band owner, mask designer, creative, does not, to the best of my knowledge, have a first degree. That does not prevent you from being awarded an honorary degree, because honorary degrees get awarded based on a range of things, especially a contribution to specific fields. So how it is work is this. A long list of nominees is drawn up by all of the faculties at the campus. And when you have that long list drawn up, that long list, they have to go before a committee and they have to sit down, and the dean of each faculty has to build a case to justify why each of the candidates that each faculty has selected should be awarded an honorary PhD. And it's not everybody on the list who then gets selected. So cases have to be built. So Dr. Frederick could not in any way just decide this is going to take place. He would have had, he or whoever would have, he or whichever individual, whoever nominated Dr. Rowley for the honorary degree would have had to build a case, right? Would have had to build a case. So when you turn around and seeing jackassness like this, Patrick Watson was the first person to put up the picture, then kick out the PNM. Then I see the latest person that appears to be on the UNC's roster of online trolls, Kevin Baldeusing. He also put up this thing about quid pro quo. Now, let me explain to all you what this quid pro quo thing is about. What the United National Congress and its social media disruptors and disinformers are trying to imply is that the Prime Minister paid for an honorary degree. And let me tell you why that is laughable. An honorary degree adds nothing to Dr. Rowley's CV. Dr. Rowley has a PhD that he earned, a PhD that he didn't have to pay for, a PhD that he did legitimate research for. Dr. Rowley has served for however many years as an MP. He has also served for 7 years and counting as a Prime Minister. He would have had 5 years as an opposition leader. So he already has a formidable resume. An honorary PhD is not adding anything significant to his resume. It's a nice feeling. It's an honor to be recognized. It puts you in a position where, you have a little bit more frills on your resume, but it is not adding anything more significant than what he has already achieved. So in my mind, when I heard that he was getting an honorary degree, I thought, hey, good for him. I didn't think it was that big a deal. I work in academia, and I didn't think that this was that big a deal. Yes, it's good to honor people. Yes, it is good to recognize people's contribution and to note people's contribution. It's nice to give them accolades. It's nice to give them their applause. It's nice to give them their flowers. That's the term we just use these days. Not so? Give people their flowers. So I looking on, I'm like, okay, Dr. Rowley get any flowers? Great. People lost their minds over an honorary PhD. Dr. Rowley could have stepped down as Prime Minister before the award of this honorary PhD and still have a formidable resume. Dr. Rowley could step down before the award of this and still be invited to serve on any number of committees, boards, organizations, whatever have you, because of his credentials. All you really and truly lost all your mind over one honorary degree. That's what have all you bitter for the last 3-4 days. So you had this from kick out the PNM. You also had this from kick out the PNM. Those people at Howard University who give Rowley the honorary doctorate should go live Trinidad for 6 months. I looked at that. I looked at the language and I realized something. It's not just Marsha who running kick out the PNM page. Somebody who live in foreign also running this page. You know why? For somebody to say should go live Trinidad, it means that that person living in another part of the world. Because somebody who living here would have said the people at Howard should come to Trinidad for 6 months. So I watched that and I said, oh, okay, who comes and them have overseas that running the page, boy? So kick out the PNM was well up in its fields. Then you had Inshan. And I was like, okay, all right, Inshan, up in your fields, more small bamboo energy because someone got an honorary PhD. Actually, let me pour water in my mouth. A black man, the black prime minister that they get up every day loving to hate, got an honorary PhD and it bothering them bad. So that was Inshan. Then I saw, where is it, boy? I forget to put it up. I saw the Dr. Charlo Paul person. I saw that post as well. And I thought, all you're writing to Howard University to tell Howard University take back the honorary degree and to send hateful messages to Dr. Frederick. So let me show you something. Just now, I had to pull up something here and switch screens. In the United States, Howard University is also under attack from Republicans. So the same way UNC supporters here and opposition supporters here up in their fields and toting and cussing and having the nastiest things to say about Dr. Rowley and his honorary degree, in the United States, the Republicans are saying the same thing about Joe Biden. So check it out. So here is Nathan Brand. This is his Twitter feed. And of course, this is when they're about to confer the award on Joe Biden. And he's like, there's no way this guy is talking about Joe Biden. Look at the things that are being said. They just cheapen the value of their degree. He's certainly not talking about you, grade school dropout. Hey, not everyone can go to Hillsdale College. Look at this. Look at this image. And in the image, they're calling Joe Biden a pedophile. Does that remind you of anything? Any of this reminding you of anything? We don't have the opposition here every day of life finding a reason to call Dr. Rowley a pedophile, like repeatedly, even though there is no evidence of anything like that at all. giving them out license and calling the Prime Minister a pedophile without one shred of evidence. So the same attacks that being made by UNC on the Prime Minister and on Howard University, the Republicans in the United States are doing the same thing. And so they're here carrying on about Howard University, talking about the worth of the university, saying all kinds of negative things about Howard University. And I have it on good information that the president of Howard University is receiving the same kind of hate mail and nastiness that Dr. Rowley is receiving here, but from the Republicans in the United States. So, Trinidad and Tobago, or rather I should say, so members of the opposition that fallen all over themselves and wallowing in bitterness and hate for the last 3-4 days, nobody at Howard have all it to take on, because they're not even taking on the Republicans in the United States, right? Nobody have all it to take on. Everybody is very clear that this degree and the award of the degree and the receipt of the degree has become an extremely politicized and tribalized issue. Nobody ain't taking all you on. And the thing is, these historically black universities in the United States have been very good about reaching out to the Caribbean and making room and space and awarding scholarships to many persons from the Caribbean. So I know personally a number of persons, not all of African descent, a range of ethnicities from the Caribbean, getting the opportunity to attend historically black universities in the United States and get scholarships to do their degrees, whether it's undergrad, masters, PhDs. So you're sitting down and you're looking at conversations on some of these UNC threads, and I am seeing Trinidadians of Indian descent saying some of the nastiest things about historically black universities and colleges. And I'm like, are you serious? That's a level of hate and bitterness all you have right now because your political party not in power. So you just decide that the very people that you need to have on board to vote for you in any election, local government or general election, for you to be in a position where you have more power, all you're going to do at this stage is cuss and insult and offend people of African descent because you're not in power? Jeez and ages. All you're tiresome, you know. So, I wanted to take a trip down memory lane for a little bit. I wanted us to look at a couple of issues. I remember this young lady, or actually both women in the pictures there. The last 3 or 4 days, you had the United National Congress making a lot of noise about an honorary degree and saying some of the nastiest things about whether people were qualified or not qualified to collect an honorary degree, and suggesting that Howard University should take back its degree because infrastructure in Trinidad and Tobago is not what it ought to be. All of those things, all kinds of nasty things being said. And while there might be truth in statements that infrastructure here is not where it ought to be. I could sit down here and we could have long discussions about all of the reasons that infrastructure here is not where it's supposed to be. Because let's take, for instance, agricultural roads and the cutting and maintenance and construction of agricultural roads, because agricultural roads are important for the farming community to be able to develop agriculture as a good, robust sector in Trinidad and Tobago, right? Anybody who listening here remembers that more than $100 million, actually it's about $300 million, $300 million was given to contractors and they never built any agricultural road. Anybody remember that? Who remember was the name of that scandal? Who remember that in 2015 there was the election was going to be in September, right? September the 7th, 2015. And in August, June, July, August of 2015, $300 million was given to contractors and they never cut a fucking road. So agricultural infrastructure ain't anywhere where it should be. But why is that? What caused that problem? What have us in a position where $300 million spent to cut road and no road ain't cut? Right. I'm pulling back because I'm getting very annoyed and I want to be annoyed when I'm talking about this. So Kamala and them jump out their whole self and start to talk about who deserve and who ain't deserve. So I said to myself, and the thing is, Saturday when I see the bitterness, I was like, okay, all right, people in the fields. Sunday, I watching the bitterness. I was like, okay, all right. Monday, they're still at it. This morning you get up, they're still at it. I was like, 4 whole days all they carrying on with this for? So, let's start with Reshmi Ramnarayan. In 2010, several people at the Strategic Surveillance Agency, I think is close to 20 persons, were fired. And the director, who has a master's degree in criminology, was fired. And Reshmi, who ain't even have a first degree and was a technician at the SSA, is given the position of director of the SSA. Right? That's the first example I want to give all you. Suraj Rambachan and John Sandy get up in the People Hot Parliament in 2010, late 2010, and put it on the Hansard that Reshmi have a first degree. Right? Questions get asked in the Parliament. Does she have, SIA, so not SSA, SIA, Security Intelligence Agency. Reshmi, without a first degree, is given the position of director, right? Suraj Rambachan and John Sandy get up and defend Reshmi. Get up and say the girl have a first degree. We sit down in UE and the talk start to spread that this person claiming they have a university degree but they have no name on record for this person having a degree, right? In the people, good parliament, they put it on the Hansard, you know. So it is there. If you go back now to the Hansard, it is there where John Sandy and Saroj Rambachan get up and defend Reshmi for the position. Get up and say she well qualified. She have a first degree in wherever. Not a degree in sight, you know. And she get the work. The other people get fired. Their whole life turn upside down and turn over. Reshmi get a whole work without the qualifications. How she get her work without the qualifications? What would be the grounds, the criteria for Reshmi getting that work without the qualifications? Right? So that's exhibit A of how the UNC just give people thing they don't deserve whether or not they have the qualifications. Right? Good. Exhibit A. Next exhibit. All I remember Diane Birju. Diane Birju was the person who was at the head of the Aviation Authority, the AATT of the Aviation Authority of Trinidad and Tobago. Diane Birju is the next one who had a whole fake certificate. Make up a certificate. Make up qualifications and submit qualifications to be able to get a job that he ain't qualified for. Right? Exhibit B. All you remember Hafizul Mohammed. All you remember the Commission of Inquiry into the 1990 coup. All you remember, it had a commissioner sit down on that commission who make up a PhD calling himself Dr. Hafizul Mohammed. And when you check, Airports Authority, correct, thank you very much, Nzinga. So Airports Authority, that's Diane Birju. You had Hafizul Mohammed on the Commission of Inquiry who get up a PhD from one of them paper mill university. The same university that Neil Gosine get a PhD from the other day. Busy calling himself Dr. Neil Gosine from a university that not accredited nowhere, that is just churn out paper for people to say I is doctor this and doctor that. So Hafizul comes and sits on a commission, refuses to step down from the commission, and has fake certification. Bear in mind that he gets appointed and he's recommended to the commission by the government. Right? Good. So that's Hafizul. All remember Omar Khan. Omar Khan became the head of the Tech board. Anybody remember that Omar Khan pretended that he had engineering accreditation, claimed that he was part of the board of engineers? All remember that? And when time come, when we started check, nobody know about he, and he had to run and resign from the board position. This is the first 3 years of Kamala tenure, you know. 2010, 2011, 2012, thereabouts. All of that shit happen. And Kamala have the temerity to jump up and say Dr. Rowley doesn't deserve an honorary PhD. I ain't done. I have at least one more person. All you recognize this jackass? He like to call my name in Parliament these days. Wade Mark. That's why I put up this story for you to read today. Because I didn't want to have to go through the story. Wade Mark, back in 2013, was on record as having received an EMBA under the most curious of circumstances. Wade Mark was at that point in time functioning as Speaker of the House. Wade Mark was doing his executive masters in business management or something. Yeah, his executive business management degree. It had taken him 12 years to do this degree. So let me break down a couple things for you. When you're doing a degree at the University of West Indies, I can't talk for Lockjack because I never went Lockjack and I don't know what the rules are there. Maybe Lockjack has different rules to UE itself. If you're doing a master's, a full-time master's of philosophy is supposed to take 3 years if you're doing it full-time. If you're doing it part-time, it can take 5 years. If you are doing a PhD at the University of the West Indies and you're doing it full-time, you are doing it full-time in 3 years. If you are doing it part-time, you are supposed to take 5 years. The minute you take more than 5 years to complete it, the university writes to you and asks you to withdraw from the program or submit your thesis. So it's one of two things. You submit your thesis or you withdraw from the program and then you reapply to re-enter the program. Now, depending on how much time has passed with the degree requirements, if you re-enter a program or when you re-enter the program, you might be asked to do over some of the courses. Wade Mark took 12 years to complete an EMBA. And when he went back to complete the EMBA, they decided to award him a course mark grade, and I can only assume it's an all course mark grade that he ought not to have had be applied to the when he was currently doing over the exam. So I feel pretty certain that that mark should not have been re-awarded to him. So they give him the coursework mark that I believe he was not supposed to have. Then the next thing is, in lieu of coursework, they allowed him to do an oral exam. In all my years, I am not aware that you could do an oral exam in lieu of coursework. Correct, Kyle. His credits started to expire. Your credits expire after a particular period of time has passed. So if you enter a program, exit, re-enter, after a while, when you re-enter, you're likely to be told that the period for your core courses to apply or the credits that you have acquired to apply have passed, so you have to do over all of the basic courses. And that happened with him. So there were a range of concessions that Wade Mark got from Arthur Lockjack that made no sense. Everybody on main campus was sitting down thinking, but this sounding odd. But you know what started to sound even more odd? When we heard that Wade Mark did a final exam and he was the only person doing the final exam, and he sat in a room by himself, or sorry, let me not say by himself. He sat in a room. He was the only person doing the exam, sitting in the room, and there was somebody else in the room with him, and it didn't sound as if the person in the room with him was an invigilator. So the entire process sounded odd. And then there was also a news report that indicated that he used the Parliament's letterhead to write to the UWI seeking special privileges for the sitting of the course and taking the exam. Now, I know that once gun and bullet and murder not involved, nobody does see how these things are crimes, right? But when you are in a position to leverage your influence in society to get 5 and 10 and 15 steps ahead of people, that's a crime. That is fraudulent behavior. That is corrupt behavior. So imagine you in a position of power and you use that position of power to get yourself special treatment, while it didn't necessarily lead to death and bloodshed. It is a crime. And so imagine people who are quite capable of giving themselves awards, giving themselves qualifications, and using those fake qualifications to take other people's jobs and to take posts and positions that they're not entitled to. And they think that's absolutely fine. They ain't seen anything wrong with that at all. Not a problem they have with anything like that. So that is Wade Mark. I need to jump over here now and pull up a newspaper article. Just give me a second. Let me find it. There's a final false papers exhibit. In 2011, Kamla Prasad Bissessa and Anand Ram Logan awarded themselves silk. So let me explain to all you how the silk process does go. The Attorney General draws up a long list of candidates, right? The Attorney General. Who was the Attorney General in 2011? Anand Ram Logan. So Anand Ram Logan sat down and came up with a list of persons who should get silk. And on that list, Anand decided to put down his name and the Prime Minister's name. Now, after the Attorney General drafts up that list, the Attorney General is then meant to confer with the Chief Justice. Anand Ram Logan conferred with the Chief Justice, Ivor Archie. And you know that Ivor Archie's name was also on that list of persons to receive silk. So in that year, 2011, Anand Ram Logan put his name, put the Prime Minister name, and put the Chief Justice name on a list and said, here, we going an award we self, silk. And it caused a major uproar because after Annan creates the list and Annan confers with the Chief Justice on the list, the next step is that the list goes before the cabinet. The head of the cabinet is the Prime Minister. So that means there was a cabinet meeting. Now, the way our government is formed, you only need 2 people to constitute the government, right? That's Prime Minister and Attorney General. So the 2 most critical people in a cabinet, the Prime Minister and the Attorney General, put their names down on a list for silk. They are the ones that get to decide who gets silk, and they put their own names down on a list to get silk. And it is their responsibility to look at that list and determine who are the persons and whether the persons meet the criteria or not. So imagine it is your award to give out, and you sit down in a room with your own people and decide we going and give we self the award that we going to give out. That is how nasty that whole awarding of silk was. So when all your ponging Kamala about giving herself silk, I want all you to understand the process properly. Annan Ram Logan, as Attorney General, would have drawn up a list of awardees. He would have put his name on the list, Kamala's name on the list, and the Chief Justice's name on the list. Then he would have conferred with the Chief Justice. And so Annan and the Chief Justice would have gone over the list and determined, yes, these people going to be awarded silk. And in the list of persons that are going to be awarded silk, we self on the list. Then the list would go to the Prime Minister, she on the list. And she would sit down with the cabinet and they would go through the list and they would all decide, yes, Madam Prime Minister, you have to get silk, your Attorney General have to get silk. That is the level of corrupt behavior we had here at the level of governance. So when you're talking about silk and who getting silk, so the other day everybody up in the fields about Colin Kangaloo and Kerwin Garcia, not so? Right. So let me deal with that real quick. Colin Kangaloo and Kerwin Garcia couldn't put the name on that list. It had to be the Attorney General who put the name on the list, right? And after the Attorney General put their names on that list, the Attorney General would then confer with the Chief Justice. And after he confer with the Chief Justice, that list would then go forward to the Cabinet. And the Cabinet would confer and they would decide, and then they send the final list to the office of the President. Christine Kangaloo, Her Excellency, had no role to play in drafting the list and coming up with the final set of names on the list, right? Nobody is saying that the AG is not PNM selected, my dear. Nobody is saying that. The point that I am making is that you cannot say that the office of the president was responsible for the list. Okay? Don't jump the gun. Right. So, silk and the awarding of silk to self. I want to... Oh yeah. I had the Rudy Chato Paul thing here, yes, but I had it too far up. Right. Now, There was a link I wanted to show you all. Let me see if I can find it. The response to Dr. Rowley's award isn't an atypical response, not by any stretch of the imagination. Here's the link. 2007, Patrick Manning would have received an honorary degree. I'll move myself here. Let me make this big. Right. So September 2007. This is Christy Ramnarine writing for The Express. And this is somebody's blog post, right? The person calls himself Old Blagger. So Prime Minister Patrick Manning will receive an honorary Doctors of Law degree from the Medgar Evers College in New York, USA next Wednesday. The award ceremony is scheduled to take place at 10 a.m. in the Founders Auditorium of the college, where Manning will be honored with a Doctor of Laws degree honoris causa. Look at the comments that are made by the blogger. He says, this is an old, I ain't saying the word because I don't want to cause no problems. I don't want to get blocked. Or I don't want anybody accusing me of hate speech. This is an old, you're seeing it, school in Brooklyn. This is where learn to thief and also where N-word learn the art of the world owes them. Then he says, this effing dumbass university giving out effing degrees like hampers and Laventee. This effing piece of shit fun institution for education is looking for international recognition. You know what I mean? Nobody with any sense recognize what this effing place is all about. Right? This was 2007. A blog post looking at Prime Minister Manning getting an honorary degree, and these are some of the comments that was made. Racist, nasty comments about Prime Minister Manning receiving an honorary degree. Well, you need to start to pick sense from nonsense, Yes, I will share the link on my page, Christopher. Don't worry, don't stress yourself out at all. I'll share it on my page. If I ain't do it, somebody else will do it for me. So I want to make sense out of all of this. Because you see, it's very easy to see those comments, to listen to the things that have been said in the last couple of days, and just respond angrily to all of the insults, all of the abuse, all of the distasteful things that are being said, especially since we understand the sacrifices that we make to be able to get an education, to move forward in life. And when you achieve things, to see people decide to just drag down your achievements on the basis of your skin color is something that must anger you. But I said, you know what? Let me put some thought into this. And I'll tell you why I decided to put some thought into it. Because it is not my way to go around being vexed, angry, upset with people all the time. And I am mindful of a couple things. I had the opportunity to be very well educated in Trinidad and Tobago. I had the opportunity to study history at secondary school and then again for a degree when I was at the University of the West Indies. So I want to introduce you all to somebody. I want to show you all somebody. This is one of my lecturers, Professor Bridget Brereton. Professor Brereton taught me several history courses. One of them was basic how to go about doing historical research. Another course was gender history. So gender, the history of women in the Caribbean, right? So she would have taught us how to look at the female side of history in the Caribbean. She also taught me at least one other course in the history of Trinidad and Tobago. So I would have met her work in secondary school. I don't know how many of you did history in secondary school, but this book was my first introduction to Bridget Brereton, Prof. Brereton. And it's called Social Life in the Caribbean, 1838 to 1938. It's not a big book, a big book. It's a small, slim volume. But even though it's a slim volume, there is so much in that slim volume about everybody's day-to-day experience in the Caribbean in that 100-year period, that it is quite simply, in my mind, a book that every household should have on its shelves, because it gives you the opportunity to understand what life was like here for all of the groups, or the majority of the groups, in the post-emancipation period. So after emancipation and before independence. The book, real eye-opening. So I did history, O-levels, A-levels, undergrad. Another book from Professor Brereton that you all should get and read is this book, Race Relations in Colonial Trinidad, 1870 to 1900. And why I'm talking to all about these books? Because we are to talk about the history of our education system. And we have to talk about the history of how we educated ourselves. So let we start. Class in session. Everything else there was preamble. Education was not a priority in the Caribbean. Right? Listen to me, and listen to me well. White people, the Europeans who was running the Caribbean, they had no interest in educating black people and the other groups that were here. We were here strictly as labor. But once abolition came into play and they realized that there was going to be a situation where people were no longer going to be free labor, an education system began to be implemented. The state relied on religious organizations in the first instance to provide education. So what you had from 1834, right? Because remember, that's when the Emancipation Proclamation was read out. But emancipation really came into effect in 1838. So, from 1834, you had a range of religious missionaries, Catholic and Anglican for the most part in the early stages, and then Presbyterian, Methodist, Baptist would have come in at different phases, and they would have started their missionary work. And part of what they would have done was set up churches, obviously, and they also set up schools, primary schools for the most part. So we would have had a primary education system going up to whatever was the post-primary class, and you'd be teaching. That's the level of education that was given. To go on to do secondary education, more often than not, you had to pay to do it privately. Now, the emancipated people, former enslaved persons, took advantage of education. I want to say that again. Emancipated people, former enslaved people, people of African descent, took advantage of education. And there is one very basic reason that people of African descent in the post-emancipation era took advantage of education: for upward social mobility. So you're looking at from 1838, go down, come down, to now, 1838 to 2023, people of African descent have always ever taken advantage of primary, secondary, and tertiary education as a way of upward mobility. Right? I need to make that point. And I need to make that point because for whatever reason, I'm not sure why it is necessary to spread this particular piece of propaganda, but for whatever reason, the United National Congress and its support base likes to pretend that persons of African descent have an issue with getting educated. They love to speak about African descended people, the African descended community here, as dunce, as illiterate, as not wanting to be in school, when the West African descended community is the one community that has the longest history in the post-emancipation era of accessing and taking advantage of education for upward social mobility. There is no other thing that allowed black people to move up in a colonial society the way education did. And that book, this book makes the point. That's why I had it up on the screen for so long. So you could see it, you could go and look for it, you could purchase it, you could read it. Education was the way in which the black community moved up socially. Unless you were part of the free colored class, and then you might actually be landowners. But the free colored class, they didn't have to deal up with enslavement. They would have been free. They would have been landowners. I am talking about the emancipated population from 1838 to 2023. Now, what we need to bear in mind is this. Barbara, come into that. Don't worry. I'll come into the land issue. Don't rush the brush. All you need to take it slow this evening. Lube up all yourself and get ready, because I'm going to rest it in inch by inch. So, emancipated people taking advantage of education from 1838 to 2023. They was catching their ass to be able to buy land. all kind of laws passing to prevent them from having access to land, right? 1845 is when the East Indian community gets here. And the East Indian community gets here, and they get here as labor. As labor. So they are here, they are brought here, and they are brought here to function as paid labor on estates. There is no focus in the 1800s on educating the bonded labor force, and there's no shame there. That ain't nothing to laugh at anybody about or point fingers at. East Indian indentured laborers came here, fled India, came to the Caribbean because they were guaranteed a wage here. So they would have come and they getting paid to work. They're being told that at the end of their contract, they either getting paid passage back to India or they are going to be given land. Bear in mind, you're coming from India. English is not their first language. You get to Trinidad. I ain't talking about Tobago. You get to Trinidad. And when you get to Trinidad, there are 2 languages, actually no, 3 languages that are being spoken here. You have some people speaking Spanish, some people speaking French. French was the majority language in the 1800s, and some people speaking English. Depending on the school, depending on the religious organization that run in the school, some schools might actually be in French. So if it was Catholic schools during the 1800s, they were delivering their curriculum in French. If it was Anglican schools, they delivering their curriculum in English. So you come to the Caribbean and you are speaking, whether it is Bhojpuri, Urdu, Telugu, whatever, any one of the dialects or languages coming out of India, you speak in that. You're not necessarily literate in that. You're not necessarily writing in the language or reading in the language, but you speak in the language and you are working on an estate. So education, going to school, you don't have time to do that. You're supposed to be working during the day. The children as well are also working on the estates. So while the emancipated population is in a position to send its children to school, the East Indian population did not have that privilege. So I want you all to understand something. The majority of the 1800s, people of East Indian descent, they weren't accessing education. They weren't in the education system. It is persons of West African descent and the other groups here. They are the ones that would have been making access to the education system. Eventually, Presbyterian missionaries start to make inroads and start to provide education for the children of bond laborers. And even so, that would have been in small numbers because these households couldn't necessarily afford to not have all of their children working on estates. So you would have situations where maybe 1 or 2 of the boys, not the girls, 1 or 2 of the boys in an East Indian descended household getting the opportunity to access education. And correct, Barbara, many of them kept their language, kept their religion, because the intention was to return to India. They were here on contract. Trinidad was not seen as a space that they were going to settle in for forever. But eventually they did. They chose to. Indenture ends 1917. That's when the last batch of contracted bond laborers come in here. And so their contracts end in 1921. It is well after 1921. It is somewhere in the 1940s that the Muslim League, so TML and TIA, set up schools for the Muslim population. But because you're looking at people of East Indian descent, in some instances, people who would, families that would have been Hindu might have sent their children to those schools as well for them to get an education. So it's Presbyterian missionaries and then TIA, TML providing education to the East Indian descended community. Then it would have been late 40s, early 50s that the Mahasabha started to set up schools, primary schools here in Trinidad and Tobago to provide more education to the Hindu community. And again, it would have been mostly boys getting the opportunity then to go to school. It was atypical for families of East Indian descent to be sending their daughters to get a full primary, full secondary, and God forbid, tertiary education. It was not typical. And you might be wondering, what's the point I'm making here? The point that I am making here is, for a very long time, the East Indian population here was looked down on and laughed at as not being educated, as not having made something of themselves via education, as not necessarily being intellectual types. And so there is deep-seated self-esteem issues where education and qualifications concerned. Let me tie in that to something else. To get a job in the public sector here, prior to independence and after independence, you had to have proficiency with language and maths, as in English and maths. If you're not going to school, if you're not sending your children to school, where are they becoming literate and numerate? Or how are they becoming literate and numerate? They are not. So, a public sector job is not a job that they would be able to apply for. So, stop and think about something. You have a population whose adults and children are not considered to be educated, right? Because they aren't going to formal schools. They're not doing exams, they're not doing tests, they don't have certificates. So it means that the jobs that they are going to get are the unskilled jobs. And unskilled jobs are low-paying jobs. So then what does that community do? Because it can't go into public sector jobs, and there are a range of private sector jobs that they can't apply for. So in a situation like that, you instead create your own industries. So they remained in agriculture, and they then also branched out into other areas of business that didn't require them to have certificates and degrees and school qualifications to be able to do those jobs, right? And so that's why for a number of decades the public sector was mostly people of African or mixed descent, because those are the communities that were accessing education. To be able to apply for a job in the public sector, you had to have GCE subjects. You had to be able to establish that you have passes in math and English. So that's why 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, up to the 1980s, you would have seen the majority of the public service and civil service, right? So public sector, civil service being mostly persons, I'm not saying it entirely, but mostly persons of African or mixed race descent. Instead, I grew up hearing that the government keeping Indian people out of jobs, when that was not the case. What would have been the case is to be able to qualify for and apply for these jobs, you had to be able to establish via school leaving certificates that you had math, English, and a range of other subjects. If 1920s, 1930s, 1940s, 50s, 60s, only a limited section of your community is accessing education, and for the most part, boys are being privileged over the girls, what do you think going to happen? And once money was spent on the boys to go to school, they had to focus on the professions, either medicine or law, and in some instances, engineering. It is from the 70s come forward that there was an explosion in the East Indian descended community accessing education in a wider way. Even when I was growing up in Central in the 80s, there would still be families where not all the girls being allowed to go to school beyond a particular age. And I would be stunned, because I know in my house, everybody had to do primary school, everybody had to do secondary school, and all of we had to make up we mind what degree we planning to get. So that is meant to help you to understand the level of insecurity that members of the East Indian community still have where the issue of education is concerned. And unfortunately, there are some persons, when they're insecure about something, what they have to do or what they feel compelled to do is to lash out at other people and to say nasty things and to say insulting things. So they want people to focus on their shortcomings, and rightly so. We shouldn't be focused on their shortcomings. We should understand their shortcomings and understand that they're responding in a particular way because of shortcomings. But it doesn't mean that we have to accept abuse. And this is where I just start to get vexed. Because I can understand that as a community, you would have faced setbacks in terms of your ability to access education. I can understand that because the African descended community has had many setbacks. Accessing education wasn't cheap, right? If you wanted your children to go on beyond primary school, you had to pay for it. That's not cheap. And if you are in a position where you can't work for more money than your skin color allowing you to work for, you can't afford to educate your children. So you're looking at different groups being on different levels of footing. Different groups not necessarily having access to the same amenities that people who light skin and white skin here just take for granted. And I understand, I grasp that the community wasn't always in a position to boast about its academic achievements. I get that. It's one of the things that has had me looking on when common entrance. Lord, I'm giving away my age. When SEA comes around, O levels or CSEC and CAPE results come around, and there's all of this boasting, we just beat book. And I'm like, yeah, but historically, the African descended community been beaten book. We been beaten book since 1838. Because beaten book is all we had for upward social mobility. Nobody gave we land after our contract ended. Nobody paid us for the labor we were doing. So why do you think that you need now to come and say to us, look how we are achieving? Good for you. But the African descended community has been achieving for more than a century. We've been educating our children. They've been winning scholarships. They've been going on to impact the rest of the world. So why do you think that you could whine on us? You can't. To decide that because from the 80s onward, your children started to achieve and to excel is a reason to insult the African descended community makes no damn sense. What you ought to have been doing these last 4 to 5 decades, from the 80s to now, I know my maths is so hot, right? What you ought to have been doing from the 80s to now, when your children started to excel more, praise your children, praise yourself, feel proud. But there is no need for you to have to insult other people to feel better about yourself. You understand? Or like the point I'm trying to make here? If I go send my children to school and the neighbor next door of East Indian descent send their children to school, and my children do real good in school, I would think, yes, I would celebrate my children. Yes, I would be happy about their achievements, but I am not then going to decide that my children achieving means I have to insult my neighbor's children for them not having achieved. So, on a regular basis, I am always looking on at the United National Congress, and this position did us take that the only way as a party they could feel good about themselves is to insult black people. They can't just talk about their achievements and be happy about their achievements. They have to consistently compare themselves to another group and put a foot on the neck of this other group. At no point in time, listen, I teaching for a living, right? I am teaching for a living. I have to teach children from every class group, as in every social class, or from every geographic location, every ethnicity, all walks of life. You think I could walk into a classroom and have notions in my head about who should be respected and who should be disrespected? That is madness. And here you have, so let me bring it full circle now. Here we have a country, Trinidad and Tobago, a country that might be small, but it has had big impact on the rest of the world. And one of these days, I go bring back Lovell, or I'm seeing somebody asking me to have Professor Brereton on. I will invite her and ask her what she wants to talk about, and once she's willing, I don't have a problem interviewing Bridget Brereton. She is one of my favorite persons to talk to. Here we have a small twin island nation, one of the most powerful nations in the Western Hemisphere. Me talking about the Caribbean, I talking about the Western Hemisphere. Our Prime Minister, whether you like him or don't like him, our Prime Minister is given an honorary degree. If you're vexed about the honorary degree, it would have been enough to say, well, me really in support of he getting that, or you could have just hush him out and say nothing about it at all. Instead, you had to jump on social media, insult the man, insult the university, and drag the country's name through the mud because you have your insecurity issues about education. So you might want to ask, what was the point of pointing out all of the qualification issues that we had under Kamala's tenure? You see all them false qualifications and running down fake accreditation? That's what insecure people do. Insecure people just want to cut corners left, right, and center. Insecure people are capable of all kinds of manipulative behavior. Insecure people are toxic. Insecure people just gaslight you. Insecure people just find all kinds of ways to make anybody else who they think better than them feel worse. That's what they love to do. So when you see the UNC and them carrying on with the nonsense, I'm looking for something. I just need you all to remember that they are, by and large, an insecure group of persons. And that is what I just keep in mind all the time. Because I understand the history. I understand what colonialism does do to you. I understand how having different advantages and different disadvantages, how that could cause all kind of problems inside a psyche. And I understand how those disadvantages and the perceived imbalances, how that could lead to a culture of self-hate. Don't get tied up in that culture of self-hate. And if you remember nothing else from this live, remember this: Black people have been getting themselves educated in the Caribbean since 1838, right? If you remember nothing else, since 1838, we have been bettering ourselves. Olia, the next live is supposed to be on the weekend. I want to come and talk to you about guns. Thanks for joining me. Olia, take care. All right?
I say you get up one morning, your elders have